It's time for a comprehensive Fantom update. I'll be answering the question of whether Fantom can hit $1 in the near future. I'll also be looking through some of the latest big announcements that we've had from the latest quantum conference in Miami, as well as looking at the metrics for Fantom and looking through the Fantom price, giving you guys my analysis and my outlook for Fantom in the future. It's going to be a massive update video. We're going to cover the entire ecosystem. So make sure, if you're not already, that you click the subscribe button to the channel, because I post every single Saturday at 8 a.m. EST. And also make sure you turn on notifications so you don't miss a video. I am back into a regular rhythm now of posting consistently here. You guys know I also stream on Crypto Banter every single day, but it's good to be on the channel giving you guys updates like this. So we have a lot to talk about in today's video. So I reckon we just get straight into it. Now, Fantom recently has risen in price alongside a lot of other crypto coins in the market off the back of a Bitcoin rally, which did show some strength once we started to get inklings that the Fed was going to be slowing down the pace of rate hikes. But Fantom actually led a lot of the L1s and pumped harder than a lot of the other L1s because of a few major announcements that we have gotten in the recent weeks, which I will go over in today's video, as well as we inch closer and closer to the FTM, the Fantom Virtual Machine rollout. Now, pre-conference, we did see Fantom perform very strongly as Cronje was speaking for the first time in a while. So everyone was kind of anticipating some big news from Andre, but he did come out before he did make his speech and say, look, don't expect any major announcement from me. I just want to give you guys an update on the ecosystem and what I'm building hype free. But we did get some big announcements from the CEO, Michael Kong, which we'll go over in today's video, which I think have huge ramifications for the ecosystem. But it's been good to see some bullishness for Fantom, after it's stagnated for quite some time alongside a lot of other L1s. So I think without further ado, let's dive into the metrics and work out what is happening on chain, because to really position ourselves and work out where Fantom is currently sitting in the market, we have to evaluate how it looks in terms of its on-chain data, its transactions, its TVL, some of the metrics relative to other chains before we jump into some of the big fundamental announcements. So the first thing I want to look at and consider is the current TVL of Fantom. Interestingly, over the past month, Fantom has been one of the chains that has seen the most inflows, with an increase of 25.39% in dollars flowing into the ecosystem, and it does still sit in the top 10. So although Fantom did see a drop-off due to its DeFi dominance, and then as the market went risk-off, a lot of TVL was subtracted from the DeFi ecosystem, it is still sitting at a figure of $515 million, which is nothing to snuff at, in my opinion. That's still a significant amount of capital when we consider Solana's now only sitting at 268 million. Other chains that are gaining traction lately, like Aptos, is only sitting at 50 million. Fantom sitting at 500 is not bad, although we have seen chains like Arbitrum and Optimism flip it as L2 dominance has significantly increased. But in its own way, although it's technically not an L2, you could consider Fantom in a similar basket to Arbitrum and Optimism, as it's kind of alleviating transaction pressure off the Ethereum network and has multiple bridges that help it connect to the Ethereum network. And that was only aided by the recent announcement that the Axelar bridge would now be supporting cross-chain swaps on Fantom. So that did help the cause for Fantom's interoperability with other EVM chains, but it's still sitting in the top 10. And in terms of the TVL on Fantom, although we have seen a major drop-off since all that crazy solidly hype last year, we've seen some nice gains across the ecosystem in the past few weeks. We've seen SpookySwap gain 34% over the last month, Geest Finance gain 20%, Beats, which is a project I've been most impressed with recently, that's gained 32%. Beefy as well, so one of the compounders and aggregator protocols, which is cross-chain, also gained 26%. So we are starting to see some protocols gain some steam on the Fantom network once again. And also one of Andre's projects, Yearn Finance, is also performing well. Juice Finance as well, coming in that top 10 as a protocol that has been shipping and has been building in the bear market. So from an ecosystem perspective, we still have some great dApps on Fantom. And although the growth hasn't been as impressive, like let's say on other chains like Arbitrum last year, we still have seen some decent performances in terms of the DeFi ecosystem, and we've seen some really interesting new projects launch on chain and that have performed decently. So it's important to just look over the ecosystem and see where we sit. Now, if we look at the market cap to TVL ratio, Fantom is still sitting quite low, and this isn't something that's new to the Fantom ecosystem. It's always sat very low in terms of its market cap to TVL ratio, meaning that the market prices it cheaper than some other chains. I think mostly because of Fantom's perception in the market being kind of like a DAG, and also being a DeFi chain. It kind of attracted a lot of TVL, but it didn't necessarily reflect so in the market cap, which in my opinion creates opportunity, but at the same time, it's not a metric we can look too far into and make too many conclusions from, because the market isn't exactly rational, and TVL is just one indicator that can kind of dictate how a project is valued. TVL in general, at least in recent times, we've seen to be a leading indicator. So when you see TVL coming into an ecosystem, that typically does result in a price rise at a later date. And typically when we see TVL coming out of the ecosystem, we tend to see price lag and start to decline as that kind of sets into the market. So it'll be interesting to see where the Fantom TVL goes, whether we see the DeFi ecosystem continuing to exhibit what it's exhibited over the last month, which is some nice growth. But in terms of its market cap to TVL metrics, still relatively undervalued. And interestingly, if we compare Fantom to Aptos and compare the on-chain metrics, it's pretty damn crazy. Like Aptos, if you guys don't know, it's an upcoming L1 blockchain which recently just launched. So technically not upcoming anymore, but it's kind of a newer language without much of a developed ecosystem yet. And it launched with a lot of hype and a lot of VC backing and has done crazy multiples in recent times, but doesn't actually have that much network activity and doesn't actually have that much total value locked or cumulative volume. And when we compare this to the Fantom ecosystem, we can see that the Fantom volume is 10x that of Aptos. And we can see that the Fantom TVL is 12x that of Aptos, and the cumulative volume is 1,113 times the amount of Aptos. Yet Aptos is valued at $18 billion in the market in terms of its fully diluted valuation, and Fantom is only sitting around $1 billion. Right now, it is $1.4 billion fully diluted valuation. So it's crazy because you've got Aptos at a 12x multiple to Fantom in terms of FDV, but Fantom's metrics are killing it. And it just kind of goes to show that the market isn't always rational, and metrics are just metrics that can kind of give us an idea as to how an ecosystem is developing, but isn't necessarily the be-all and end-all when it comes to market caps and valuations in the market. What I think is a positive sign for Fantom, though, is the uptick we've seen in recent times in terms of its trading volume and TVL, as we've just kind of shown. Although kind of we have seen a stagnation in the Fantom ecosystem, as we've seen, this isn't exclusive to Fantom across many other L1s. We have seen a little uptick. You can see here, we're starting to see some DEX volume uptick on Fantom heading into 2023. So it's good to see the ecosystem starting to be used a little bit more. But that isn't necessarily reflecting on the transaction chart yet. So the total transactions have kind of started to taper off to the downside. But it is important to keep perspective here that Fantom at its peak during that solidly hype was doing 1.5 million transactions a day. And although it's now doing 355, Arbitrum, a network that has a lot of hype and a lot of users and a lot of great new dApps on it, that in perspective is only doing 400,000 per day. So Fantom essentially doing the same amount of transaction volume as Arbitrum, which is a network that's much more hyped, at least on social media. And you see more of a buzz around ecosystems like Arbitrum. And it is doing the same amount of daily transaction volume as Aptos, which is quite interesting given, Aptos has an obscene valuation. The unique address chart for Fantom is looking quite solid. We're seeing daily increases of, 50, 60, 70,000 a day. We even saw a day of 262,000 new users, and we saw 22,000 new users recently. Now, these metrics are slightly flawed because there was a protocol called Zen, which had extreme emissions, and they had incentives for people to use the Zen protocol, which resulted in a lot of new Fantom wallets being created. So some of this is definitely artificial, but that isn't just something that happens on Fantom. That happens across many ecosystems, Solana namely being one of them, where you see crazy growth in unique addresses, but maybe that doesn't necessarily reflect in a growth in daily active users, whereas Fantom is currently sitting around the 5,000 daily 450,000 daily active users mark and the 5,300 daily active contracts mark. Another kind of interesting metric that we're seeing starting to tick up for Fantom in recent times is the amount of Fantom being transferred. So people are starting to transfer the token on and off chain. We've seen a little uptick post FTX heading into 2023. So like most L1s, we have seen some metrics starting to flip bullish for Fantom, although it has been a kind of a long time of stagnation and steady decrease in the market. So it has been good to finally, see some metrics starting to tick upwards. So let's go through the exciting part of the show now. Obviously, before we get into the Fantom price, before we look at the charts, and there's actually a very important level on the charts which I want to point out to you, which we're about to break. So I want to go through that at the end of the video. But first, we have to go through the recent updates in the Fantom ecosystem because there's been a lot. And although the metrics kind of paint one picture, we get a much more complete picture by looking at what the FTN is working on, and also looking at some of the announcements that they announced at the Quantum conference in Miami just yesterday. So the first thing that we need to look over once again is this Medium article that Andre posted, which was Fantom, an inside financial peek at being a crypto company. He went through the ecosystem and kind of showed how much runway they had. One of the really crazy statistics that we got from this Medium article is that over 450 million Fantom are currently being held in the treasury, with $100 million in stables being held in the treasury, $100 million worth of crypto assets, 50 million in non-crypto assets, with a salary burn rate of only 7 million. This essentially means that at the current level of salary burn versus the amount of assets they've got in the treasury, Fantom has 30 years worth of runway. And these stats were published in November during the FTX collapse. And now it's January, and a lot of these assets, which are denominated in other asset terms, will be significantly up in dollar value, which means Fantom probably has more than 30 years runway. It might have closer to 40 or 50 years based on current data. But obviously, crypto prices do fluctuate. Just for a bit of comparison, Solana, based on the same treasury versus burn rate, had around 30 months worth of runway in November. They do have significantly more now because they did make tweaks, and we saw them kind of update with an article based on their own runway. But for perspective, Fantom has much more runway than other similar protocols, which is, I think, bullish for Fantom. And this is one of the reasons why a lot of people started to get interested in Fantom again after it dropped off and people were saying it was a dead chain. It was a ghost chain, part of the pun. Now, we're starting to see a lot more confidence because they know Fantom has runway. And we know in a bear market, one of the most important constituents of success long-term, coming out of a bear market and then succeeding into the next cycle, is going to be runway and going to be a project's ability to survive a bear market because conditions get tough as liquidity gets sucked out of the ecosystem. So runway was definitely one big box to tick. But we have a few more boxes that were ticked over the last couple weeks with some big announcements. The first announcement was the Fantom blockchain is developing an ecosystem fund using a portion of burnt Fantom fees. So they created a new fund aimed at empowering builders on Fantom by offering a decentralized avenue for funding projects, ideas, and creations through a community-driven decision process. So Fantom released a decentralized vault product to fund projects and applications that are building on its blockchain, developers said a few weeks ago. It's called the Ecosystem Vault, and the project is an on-chain fund financed by 10% of the transaction fees on Fantom and controlled by the community. The initiative was made possible by decreasing the burn rate of Fantom and redirecting the resulting 10% of the vault. So essentially what they're doing is they're taking 10% of all transaction fees on Fantom and using that as an ecosystem development fund to incentivize new development on chain. And I think this is a really awesome initiative to get some new dApps developing in the ecosystem, to plump up the development activity of the ecosystem, and also incentivize users to come onto an ecosystem. Because this is how things work in crypto. First, before you can even think about getting users, you need quality dApps. At the end of the day, users are attracted to quality. Users are attracted to things that offer them a better experience. And the better dApps you have in an ecosystem, the more users you can then accrue. And obviously, the more users you can then accrue, the more price, the higher your network is going to be priced, as the law of network effect states. The more addresses in a network, generally, the more value that network tends to accrue. So you do need, in order to get TVL, in order to get transaction volume on your network, in order to get usage on your network, you need quality dApps. And any initiatives you can do to get quality dApps and incentivize development is a good initiative, in my opinion. And I think this is a good start for Fantom to start offloading some of the transaction fees and siphoning them into ecosystem funds. I think it's very smart. And we saw their ecosystem vault just 8 days ago did officially go live. They said the vault is a funding pool aimed at empowering builders on Fantom for new projects, ideas, and creations via community-driven governance proposals. So the community, which is the really important part of this initiative, is the driver behind where emissions are directed. So essentially, they are going to be deciding. The community, that's us, that's you, that's me, the stakers of Fantom, they are going to be the ones that decide where funds get allocated, which I think is really cool. It's kind of giving power back to the community, which I really like. They also had another program, a gas monetization affiliate program that they launched, which is which is a program which is aimed towards monetizing dApps and monetizing creators. So Fantom says the dApp gas monetization takes the framework of a revenue model that already works in Web 2, aka ad monetization, and adjusts it to incentivize developers building on the Fantom network. It's a powerful tool to attract and retain high-performing dApps. This is accomplished by reducing the burn rate of 20 to 5% and redirecting 15% towards gas monetization. Please note figures could increase, decrease in a separate governance vote. So that is also cool to see. One last thing before we get into the big announcements from the conference is the Axelar partnership. So Axelar is one of the best bridges in crypto, which essentially offers cross-chain swaps. They are now officially partnered with Fantom, which means Fantom's interoperability gets to go to the next level and has cross-chain swaps, which are now live on Spooky Swap. So that's bullish for Fantom. These kind of partnerships are very, very good to getting Fantom on more networks, or at least increasing the interoperability with other networks. That is bullish. All right, let's now talk about the announcements from the conference. There were some big ones, and we got a massive update on FVM, which is Fantom Virtual Machine, one of the network upgrades we've been waiting for so long. So let's look through the announcements, and then afterwards, we will, of course, look at the price. I'll give you my price prediction. I'll give you my key levels. I think something's about to happen with the Fantom chart over the next few days, which I'll show you. And then at the end, I'll give you my full take on what I'm doing long-term with Fantom and kind of what my mindset is on the network long-term. The first thing that was officially announced was Fantom's roadmap. So Michael Kong went on stage at Quantum Miami and started to really give us some more insights into Fantom's roadmap for 2023. So the FVM, obviously the Fantom Virtual Machine, which is basically replacing the EVM with Fantom's own proprietary virtual machine to essentially decrease the bottleneck and the congestion that the EVM, or the limitations that the EVM has. That is now scheduled for Q3/Q4. Now that isn't mainnet, that is testnet, but we're getting closer and closer. And what we thought would potentially push out to 2024, I think is now coming in 2023. So that is a very good sign that we are starting to get some more news on the FVM. We also see the Carmen State DB, which is introducing or synchronizing with features like SnapSync and introducing upgrades to nodes. That's coming in Q1, Q2. So we see continuous small little upgrades to the Fantom network in the lead up to FVM in Q3, Q4. And then obviously we're also going to get testnet integration then with the Tosca VM happening slightly before testnet integration, which offers parallel transaction control, super instruction compliance, and super instruction set selection. So there's a lot to look forward to in terms of FVM. Filecoin said FVM's launching in March 2023. I think they're wrong. I think it'll be later. It'll be closer to Q3, so maybe let's say August. But Filecoin, one of the biggest storage protocols in crypto, they're going to be integrating with FVM, which is pretty cool. So they're introducing a program called Space Warp, which is a program for early Fantom Virtual Machine builders, providing grants, bug bounties, demo day, builders showcase, and accelerators launched in order to incentivize development. So that is very, very cool. And that is also a good thing for FVM. We're already starting to see some grants and programs coming out for building on the Fantom Virtual Machine. Just some other updates from the conference. Andre didn't really say that much. He kind of just gave, kind of a typical speech related to, what his goals are for Fantom. Said some interesting stuff, more from a technical perspective. Although we did have some pretty big announcements from Michael Kong on exactly what they're working on. A lot of this will appeal more to the more development-minded people out there, but essentially what they're doing is they're identifying bottlenecks. Then they are going to be introducing a new database called Carmen. You can check out this thread in your own time from the community manager, Simone Pompozzi, if you want to zoom in and kind of read the individual upgrades that they're going to be making. But then they're going to reduce storage. They're introducing the Tosca new Fantom virtual machine. Then they're going to basically model Fantom versus Geth, which is the Ethereum version that they are obviously replacing. They did some statistics, so modeling on the transaction rate and the storage versus EVM, and we can see that the transaction rate on FVM will be 8.1 times faster and also take up 98% less storage than Geth. So that is very, very, very positive in my opinion, that they're able to kind of achieve a theoretical result that high. And also it kind of removes some of the limitations. So we did also get the full roadmap, which I went through before. So Michael gave us some big updates. Once again, if you want to look more in depth into those updates, you can go forward onto that thread and have a look. So what is my Fantom price analysis? Can we hit $1 in the near future? What is my outlook on the ecosystem? Let me give you my take right now. We have to start with some technical analysis first. and zoom out a little bit and first look at the macro, and then we'll obviously go into the smaller timeframes and look at what is currently happening. The first thing that I want to identify is that Fantom did break above the 200 MA on the daily. So this is a level that previously we rejected off multiple times, and that resulted in a pretty long bear market for the Fantom token. And then we entered this range, which was basically one long extended accumulation range. But what's interesting about Fantom is, unlike many other projects, it actually broke out of this accumulation range and broke out of this accumulation range before many other L1s like AVAX did afterwards. And a lot of L1s haven't even broken out of their ranges yet. Fantom actually has the relative strength now, which is interesting considering it didn't have relative strength for a while, and actually broke out first. So the first major level that we broke was this wedge. So this diagonal pattern on the daily and the 4 hourly that we did break out of, that gave us an indicator that we were going to start testing this 200 MA. And then on the daily, we tested the MA, got rejected, but then successfully confirmed above, and then obviously broke out of that key 40-cent level. So we broke out of 2 levels, the wedge, then we broke the 200 MA and headed towards the 40-cent zone. So very good that Fantom's showing relative strength. It's the first time in a while where we have bullish momentum for Fantom. So what can we potentially expect next from the Fantom price? In order to answer that question, we do have to zoom in onto the 1 hourly chart to kind of get more of an idea about where we sit. So the key horizontal level for me right now is 40 cents. It's actually 41 cents. That is in line with previous support and resistance for the token on the higher time frame. So for me, we're kind of at a critical point right now where we're at the bottom of this wedge. We look like we want to break down, but if we can get back into this wedge, there's 2 scenarios. There's the breakout scenario where we could potentially retest and break out back to the upside, or there's obviously the bearish scenario, which is close to playing out now, and that is a breakdown of the wedge and then a push back down towards the 45 to 40 cent mark, and that would be in the short term. So what I would look for here is whether Fantom actually confirms below this on the hourly. So just because it's a red candle below now doesn't mean it's a breakout. What we want and what we generally look for when trading in crypto is confirmed breakouts, because we want confirmed, we want to be trading on confirmation. We don't want to be trading on breakouts, because oftentimes breakouts end up being fake outs. So what we want here is, or from a short perspective, not from a long perspective, is consolidation below this zone. And then obviously you're looking at more downside. And if you're looking at the upside scenario, we'd have to confirm back inside this wedge and then break out above, confirm, hold above this level, and then we can look at pushing back up to the 50-cent mark. So there is 2 scenarios on Fantom in the short term, although it is at a critical point right now. Let's say we do break down in the short term. What are the next levels? Well, it's very clear. It's this 40-cent zone. I think a pullback to this zone could definitely be a decent place to load up on a little bit more spot as we kind of look for bullish continuation. Because if we zoom out onto the daily chart, we can see that even if we do retest the 40-cent level, this could still mean bullish continuation as long as we retest and then make a higher high. If we retest and then make a lower high, then this is an indication that Fantom has topped out, at least in the short term, and could come back down to test the 200 MA, which is that key level that we've been looking at. But as long as we do hold the 40-cent level and then look to push back up again on a rebound response, then that could be positive, a bullish indicator for the Fantom token itself. So in terms of spot, that is the next level where I look at buying. I probably wouldn't buy right now, but in terms of trading, you can definitely trade the breakout either to the short or the upside on the breakout of this wedge if you want to trade Fantom. But if we just zoom out even more and kind of go a little bit broader and look at where we could potentially hit, could we hit back to $1? I definitely think it's possible. Now, what I've seen is renewed interest in Fantom now that Entree is back. I'm starting to see metrics tick up. I'm starting to see more volume on the Fantom ecosystem. I'm seeing more buzz on social media. Generally, heading into FTM and these major upgrades, the network is looking much healthier than it was a few months ago. So I am more confident in Fantom's short-term performance than I was a few months ago, where things were looking a bit grim and we were in that accumulation zone. By the way, I did say on my live streams multiple times that I was buying around the 20-cent mark. Congrats to everyone that got on. Those ended up being fantastic buys, and we're sitting really, really pretty with our spot buys right now. So we did quite well. I think I traded it pretty well. But obviously, we have to look at potential targets for when we are going to be taking profits. So I always think it's wise to take profits, but we do have some upwards targets. The first one is 60 cents for me. I think this is a key level. If we confirm and do somehow push up to this upside, 60 cents is key. And eventually, I think we can get back to the dollar level. And I think it can happen this year. I don't necessarily know if it will. I don't have a crystal ball, and a lot of it does depend on Bitcoin. But if Bitcoin does push up towards 30K, which is one of the scenarios, then it can push up to $1. Fantom could definitely do so. But if Bitcoin loses steam, then I doubt Fantom does trade against the market, as it's generally a token that's going to follow the market, as most L1s will. So we do rely on Bitcoin's strength when it comes to trading Fantom as an altcoin, and also Ethereum as well, being the leader of many altcoins. So if Bitcoin does break out, I see 60 cents as the next target. Then from 60 to $1, there's not much resistance. I think if we did get to 60, the next move upwards would be really, really quick. I think that is where we accelerate. You guys kind of know how crypto works now. Price movement in the beginning is quite subtle. Usually you get a smaller breakout, confirmation of a key horizontal range, and then we see an acceleration zone. And that is typically when retail starts pouring in. I don't think that's happened yet. And you get a huge acceleration. So that is my scenario after we hit 60 cents. But we do have a key decision to make now at the 40-cent zone if we come down and retest, or on the shorter time frames of a breakout. So yes, I do think $1 is possible, but it is going to rely on Bitcoin. So that is the major caveat here. But Fantom is definitely in my thinking when it comes to both my trading and my portfolio. By the way, before I get into my full outlook, if you do want to trade Fantom and open a trade or buy spot, you can do so on Bybit. Right now, Bybit is making a huge $30,000 promotion. So if you do sign up for a link to a Bybit account, you can potentially get up to $30,000 depending on how much you deposit. So it's a huge deposit bonus. It's the biggest they have in their history. So if you don't have a Bybit account and you want to trade on, in my opinion, what's probably the best centralized exchange in terms of user experience, up there with Binance, then now is the time to do so, I think, because of the huge incentive they have with their $30,000 deposit bonus. So sign up using the link in the description if you want to trade on Bybit. It also helps support the channel so I can continue doing what I do every single day. And however much you deposit will reflect in terms of a deposit bonus up to $30,000. So quite a big incentive to get going on Bybit. And of course, they do have the Fantom token on both spot and perpetual trading. I believe you can trade it up to, it's making me log into my account here. I believe you can trade it up to like 20 or 30 or 40x, like huge multiples. So definitely, if you want to trade, Bybit is a good place to do so on the Fantom side. So let's get into my full analysis. You kind of have my thoughts around the price and the current TA of Fantom. The 200-day moving average on the daily is a key level. As long as we hold above that, I'm bullish. I'm longing more than I'm shorting. That's just as simple as that. I never trade against the trend in crypto. If a trend's bullish, I'm going to trade with the trend. And as soon as we flip bearish, that would probably resemble a break of the 40-cent mark, as well as a rejection of the 200-day moving average. Then maybe my thinking changes. Then maybe I look to start shorting. But right now, you kind of consider shorting when the general market momentum is bullish. So that means, I'm longing more than I'm shorting right now. So I feel like sentiment with Fantom has shifted with Andre back, building on Fantom. He's obviously a core contributor to Fantom, kind of a spiritual leader of many ways of Fantom, even though maybe he doesn't want that crown at times. I do think with him back, that's good for the ecosystem. I think the foundation's taken the right steps. I think the gas monetization program and the ecosystem fund is great. I think the development that's happening with FVM coming soon is great. And I think some of the early tests we've seen on FVM speeds has been, quite interesting to see and really positive to see. So I think FVM for Fantom is a make or break moment. And therefore, I think 2023 is the big year for Fantom. I think it's going to be the make or break year, whether this is a top performer again next cycle or whether, it underperforms next cycle. It's going to depend on the success of FVM and how it takes off. And obviously, if they can land the tech, if they can nail the tech and deliver on it, then people are going to want to develop on it because it's a very good EVM chain with quality minds behind it and a big community, so it just makes sense. But there's a lot at stake in terms of them nailing FVM, and we can't be remiss of that. So in terms of my portfolio allocation, I do trade Fantom obviously based on shorter time frame trades, as I said, in terms of swinging long and short based on the 200 MA and momentum. Right now, I'm looking to long more than I short, but I also keep Fantom in my long-term portfolio. So if you guys don't know, I split up my portfolio into long-term and medium-term, and then I also have a trading portfolio, which is entirely separate. So you guys know what I'm doing on the trading front, but on the portfolio front, I do think Fantom is still a token that's worth holding in your longer-term portfolio. It's a token that I have been stacking, the 20-cent zone. I made some buys, the 25-cent zone as well. I also made buys much higher. As you guys know, I was buying at $1. And then obviously I've averaged out my cost basis down over time during the bear market. So it is a token I'm looking to allocate roughly, and this totally depends on your portfolio, but for me, roughly 5%, 2 to 5%, I think, of my total portfolio into Fantom. And then obviously the ecosystem factors into that at roughly like a 70-30 split of Fantom to ecosystem. In a bull market, it becomes a lot higher. When I go more risk on, when things are printing money, then yeah, I'll go roughly 50-50 Fantom versus eco. But in a bear market, you kind of have to go more 80-20 or 70-30 at most, in my opinion. That's just based on my own risk tolerance. But Fantom's definitely one that I have in my long-term portfolio. My conviction there hasn't changed. It has been a shaky year, but I'm confident that things are turning around. And it's a big make or break year for Fantom. So let's keep our eye on the ecosystem because I think we're going to see a lot of activity in the ecosystem this year. And of course, if we do get a massive Bitcoin breakout to the upside, then some of the Fantom ecosystem projects could be the strongest performers. And that's also something we got to start tapping into is, what projects are building, what projects are, exhibiting strength, what new projects are launching, because when price tends to run, we tend to see the ecosystem outperform. So if we do get a period of extreme growth, then we want to position ourselves in those protocols. And that's something I'll be bringing to you guys on the channel in the near future. As we kind of reevaluate this thesis, I'll be giving you new protocols over time. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, smash the like button and remember to subscribe and turn on post notifications if you don't have them on already. And I will be back next Saturday. So make sure you've got notifications on so you don't miss it at 8 a.m. EST. I will see you in the next one.